Hello, sportsmen. Hey, remember back in February when everybody was whining about how cold it was? I mean, when a warm day was 25 degrees? Well, that's when we went out and tested the patterns of a shotgun with different shot sizes. Now, the pattern is key to a shotgun's performance, and many hunters have never taken the time to find out how their guns pattern. Well, we will on a cool day in February, so you stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost with some shooting tips for the practical sportsman. Last week, we looked at some of the basic gear a hunter needs for rabbit hunting: boots, jackets, brush pants, and chaps. We showed you the basic types of guns that rabbit hunters use, but we didn't try any or compare their performance. That's what we're going to do right now. Now, the most popular type of gun for rabbit hunting is the shotgun. Now, a shotgun does not shoot bullets. A shotgun shoots a charge of lead pellets, little lead pellets called shot. Now, shotgun shot doesn't have a very long range, 30, 40 yards or so max for killing a rabbit. Now, if you shoot this shot up into the air, it might go 400 or 500 feet maximum, but that's about it. These pellets quickly lose their velocity and drop to the ground. Now, when you buy a shotgun, they come in several gauges. The difference is in the diameter of the shells, which translates into the amount of shot that each shell can carry. 12 gauge carries the most, the 20 gauge and the 410. These are the three basic rabbit type of gauges that are used for hunting rabbits in this country. Now, you can get the 410 in a 3-inch length, which has 11/16 ounce of shot in it. But the smaller size, the traditional size, is the 2 3/4 inch. And look at this. It only has a 1/2 ounce of lead shot. 1/2 ounce of lead pellets. Now, that's why a lot of hunters like to go to the 20 gauge, a step up. 20 gauge holds 7/8 of an ounce of shot, and when you compare it with the 1/2 ounce in the 410, it's quite a bit more. Now, the largest shell on the market that is really used for rabbit hunting is 12 gauge. 1 1/4 ounces you can buy in the heavy field loads. Most of them are loaded with 1 1/8 ounce, but that's substantially more. You can see that is in the 410. Now, the more shot that's in a shotgun shell, the more pellets you send out in your pattern, the better chance you have of hitting your target at close range, and the 12 gauge comes out on top in this. Now, the reason the 410 is known as a kid's gun is because it kicks the least when it's fired. The reason for the light kick is the light shot load, the light weight of the shot that's being pushed down the barrel in a 410. Now, recoil is caused by a principle of physics, which says for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when the shotgun shell explodes inside the chamber, it creates pressures in all directions. Now, the steel of the chamber keeps the pressure, from blowing out the sides. And this only leaves this hole down the barrel as an outlet. So what happens is this, in the case of a 410, 1/2 ounce of shot is traveling down the barrel, and there's an equal and opposite reaction on the other side of the explosion that pushes the gun back. That's called recoil. Now, the amount of recoil is in direct proportion to the size of the shotgun shell, how much shot it's pushing out the barrel. The larger the shot charge, the heavier that is, the more the gun pushes back. That's the principle of recoil. The theory sounds good, but how do you really see the difference in the recoil between these guns? If you shoot them, you're snugging them into your shoulder and you feel the recoil, but let's see if I can't show you the recoil in a really graphic way. Here's a 3-inch 410 shell, 11/16 ounces of shot. And 11/16 of an ounce of shot is what is going to cause the equal and opposite reaction. Now, when I shoot this, I'm going to do it one-handed. Now, this is not the normal way to do it. I'm gripping it tightly on this end, but I think you'll see the gist here on the recoil. Not too bad. I can hold it with one hand, and it only moved, a couple inches. Now let's try the 20 gauge. Now we're stepping up more powder and 7/8 ounces of shot, 7/8 of an ounce, I should say. This is also a lightweight single shot gun, a kid's gun, but I think you'll see that the recoil is greater. I don't know about this 12 gauge, John. This one-hand shooting, it's kind of rugged. Now we have here 1.25 ounces of shot in this 12 gauge, and that's what's going to cause an equal and opposite reaction that is going to be about twice as much, at least, than the 410. Once again, one-handed, smarts. That is the equal and opposite reaction principle. That's why the 410 is regarded as a kid's gun because of the recoil. The 12 gauge is regarded as dad's gun because it's just a little tougher to shoot, tougher on the shoulder. But this is much tougher to hit rabbits with. In order to check the amount of shot and the size of the pattern that we're throwing at different distances, we'll set up pieces of cardboard at 15 and 33 yards, typical hunting and target distances. First, the 410, which has a full choke, which means the barrel squeezes down at the muzzle, keeping the shot together in a tighter group than if the barrel was, straight like a pipe. The pattern is quite small at 15 yards and only contains about 5/8 ounce of shot. At 33 yards, the shot spreads out, and it isn't very dense. Pretty tough for a kid to kill a rabbit with a 410 at this distance. Now let's try the 20 gauge, 7/8 ounce of shot with an open choke. That means it's straight like a pipe, no constriction at all. At 15 yards, the pattern is larger and has more shot, far better than the 410. At 33 yards, the pattern opens up so much that the load of number 6 shot is beginning to look iffy. So let's go to the 12 gauge double barrel. Now each barrel has a different choke. The right barrel is improved cylinder, which means a slight amount of constriction. The left barrel is modified, which means more constriction but not as much as a full choke. At 15 yards, the improved cylinder has a pretty tight pattern, smaller than the 20 gauge open choke, but the modified choke is even tighter, comparable to the 410 full choke. At 33 yards, the 12 gauge really shines through. The improved cylinder barrel has a wide pattern, but with 1 1/8 ounce of shot, it's still dense enough. The modified barrel also has an excellent pattern with plenty of density over a large area. Now that we know the different patterns, let's go to our clays trailer and try each gun on moving clay targets. These are special rabbit clays with thick rims so they can bounce on the ground. Matt Radzilowski loads the traps and demonstrates how they're thrown. They bounce unpredictably, like rabbits, and you have to shoot fast. Now, the 20 gauge that had the biggest pattern at 15 yards was also my best gun for these rabbits. I took 3 shots and smucked each one. The pattern is wide, dense, and the lightweight gun is easy to swing. Now, with that wide pattern, my margin of error was, a foot or so, and I'd still break the target. Now, the 12 gauge, on the other hand, had 2 chokes, both of them tighter than the 20 gauge. The improved cylinder choke will shoot first, then the tighter modified barrel, and I missed. 3 times in a row, I hit the first rabbit, but missed the second, shooting just a little bit behind it. Now, the difference was in the pattern. I had more margin of error with improved cylinder, and I'd miss by a few inches with the modified. Now, does this give you any clue as to how I'll do with the 410 full choke and only 11/16 ounce of shot? Well, I missed shooting a few inches behind the target. That's where I apparently always shoot with the 20 gauge. On the third shot, I compensated, swinging the gun a few inches ahead of my normal swing, and that's where the center of the pattern actually was. Now let's review those pieces of cardboard that I shot at, but we'll put a light behind them so we can see the shot pattern. The 410 full choke had the smallest, tightest pattern at 15 yards, which was comparable to the 12 gauge modified choke, also very tight. Now, I had trouble hitting the clays with both of those. The improved cylinder 12 gauge opened up wider, which helped me on the clays, but the best was the 20 gauge with no choke at all, open barrel. A nice, wide, even pattern with the largest margin of error for a shooter. Now, at 33 yards, that 410 full choke didn't have enough pellets to give a good pattern. The 20 gauge open choke, likewise, was a little sparse. But the 12 gauge was excellent on both the improved cylinder and modified barrels. Plenty of pellets, a good dense pattern that was nice and wide. So, the moral of the story is, unless you want the challenge of a lightweight, small 410, choose the largest gauge you can that is comfortable for you to carry and to shoot. Now, most women and kids won't have any trouble at all shooting a 20 gauge, has plenty of payload so it can hit the target. And if you have a choice of chokes, don't get the full choke. You want a wider choke, a wider pattern if you can get one at 15 or 20 yards. The key element for successful shotgun shooting is having a large, dense pattern that gives you little margin of error if you're shooting behind or ahead a few inches. Now, I recommend that you get some cardboard and go out and do a patterning test at different yardages with your shotgun using some different shells. You might be surprised at what's really coming out the end of your barrel. If nothing else, check out your shotgun patterns in the snow. When you know the real pattern, you'll know why your shotgun shooting is sometimes hit and miss. If you have some rabbit in your freezer from last winter, the Practical Sportsman Cookbook has a delightful recipe on page 18 called Rabbit Delight. Try this with chicken or turkey if you don't have small game on hand. The first step is to brown the meat. Small pieces, serving size. Brown them in a tablespoon of fat or oil. Then you add the rest of the ingredients. That's 1 cup of beef broth, a 1/4 cup of lemon juice, 3/4 cups of orange juice, 2 chopped green peppers, 1/2 cup of mushrooms, a tablespoon of parsley, pinch of ginger, and salt and pepper. That's all. You just put those in there, cover, and cook until the meat is tender. Now, the citrus juices and the pepper and the mushrooms might sound like an odd combination, but that's why it's called Delight. The flavor is great. Serve on rice or with mashed potatoes. This recipe is good with any small game, chicken or turkey. It's easy, it's good, it's definitely worth trying. A few weeks ago, we posed the question, should the daily limit of perch be reduced instead of closing the season in June as the DNR has already done in Lake Michigan? Well, sportsmen had a variety of reactions, but most agreed with Ryan Tabar from Owendale, who said, I have loved perch fishing for many years, and I'm ticked off. These jokers must not care for other sportsmen's rights. And from Lake Huron, Walt Jansen says, here in the Thumb, we're also license-paying sportsmen. Our perch fishing is going down each year. I live in the Caseville area. Commercial fishermen have nets out here all the time. We'd appreciate a little defense over here. Well, right now we're just talking about Lake Michigan, and one problem with the closure is the timing. Now, June is the first month in the summer. That's when most of the vacations for families start. I asked DNR Fisheries Chief John Robertson if he recognized that closing perch fishing in June would hit the economies of towns like South Haven pretty hard.
It will affect the economy of those areas. There's no question about that.
But you're saying tough.
No, we're not saying tough. We're saying that a reduction in the economic value of that fishery will be worth it, okay, is a month, as opposed to a total collapse of the fishery and a loss of the fishery in total.
So that's what is at stake here, the loss of the perch fishery in total.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you go back into the early 80s, we didn't have the perch fishing, you know, that we had in the late 80s and early 90s.
Yes, but populations go up and down all the time. They go up and down with grouse, and the DNR doesn't shut the grouse season down. We just roll with it. It goes up and down naturally.
It does. But in this case, what's important to remember, Fred, yes, there's a natural cycle. But this natural cycle is being exaggerated for reasons that we don't have an explanation for.
Well, here's a copy of a letter signed by 59 sportsmen from the west side of the state who have an explanation. They say, it seems the DNR doesn't care about the big females full of spawn being slaughtered every day the lake is fishable. The DNR protects the spawning season on bass and walleye. Why not perch? Close the season until Memorial Day like walleye and bass. Lloyd Natzmer from Essexville says, I agree with the 1 month closing, but I think the closing should have been from about the middle of April to the middle of May. This would give the perch a chance to spawn and reproduce. And Rocky Braybrooks from Pawpaw says, your position on Lake Michigan perch fishing regarding the June closure is wrong. The fish biologists in the DNR are qualified and educated. They are doing what is best for the fishery. Now, Rocky is a 1973 Natural Resources Management graduate from Lake Superior State University. Charlie Keenan is our Practical Sportsman answer man. He dug up information on this closure. How do you respond to Rocky's letter that the biologists are right in closing the fishing in June?
Well, I don't think the biologists in Michigan made this decision. I think it was a decision that was made by some political entities. There was a lot of pressure put on the DNR to agree with the four-state panel. If you take a look at the map, you can see that Michigan has most of the water that we're talking about here in Lake Michigan. Wisconsin has probably the second biggest, Illinois the third, and Indiana down to the bottom, they only have 30 miles of coastline to deal with. I called over to Wisconsin and talked to the biologist, and it's pretty easy for me to see that commercial fishing is the issue here. Commercial fishing remained about the same in Wisconsin, but there was a decline in the sport fishing. Illinois has remained the same. They've met their quotas every year. Sport fishing is down by about 50%. Indiana last year took over 700,000 pounds of fish. That was in the commercial fishery. They were down by about 61% in the sport fishery. Now let's turn and take a look at Michigan. Michigan doesn't have any commercial fishing in Lake Michigan waters, and the sport fishing has remained virtually the same.
So that's the
some
alternative?
period of time.
There will be no perch fishing if you don't close it in June? The
We
perch
feel
fishery
that
is
the
threatened
perch population is threatened, okay?
with extinction?
They're going to go to very low abundance so that sport fishing is very, very difficult.
Well, that's happened with salmon and steelhead,
Sure.
or not steelhead so much, but the other fish, and you don't close the fishery for them, you just reduce the limits. We've done that with lake trout, down to one
right.
lake trout.
That's right.
That seems to set a precedent for doing the same thing with perch.
I don't think it sets any kind of precedent like that.
If those other three states weren't in on this decision, and Michigan was you were just looking at it in terms of Michigan waters, would you close the perch fishery in June? Just from our own interests.
In Michigan, I think if we were not attempting to work with the other states, which we think is very important, because they are very much a part of our destiny in Michigan, just like we are a part of their destiny in those states, we would have chosen another alternative. I think Michigan, if we were acting unilaterally, would have gone probably with a lower bag limit.
But Michigan did close perch fishing in June. It's interesting to learn that Michigan's fish chief wouldn't have done it if he could have made the decision himself. So don't blame the biologists in the DNR. It wasn't their call. It was the political policies of your elected representatives that closed perch fishing in June. Just one more way that politics creeps into decision-making, which affects sportsmen and the law. Well, Charlie Keenan actually dug up a lot more information on this perch closure, but we're going to detail that along with information on other pertinent questions of law in our September publication. We call that Sportsmen and the Law. We'll also have a lot of letters from you viewers with your opinions. We call those scattered shots. So Sportsmen and the Law and Scattered Shots, that's coming out in September. Now, Matt Radzilowski here at the museum took all of the trophy pictures from our 1994 awards, put them in this big book. Of course, we call it the Trophy Book. Let's take a look right now at the brook trout. Billy Ackerley from Little Lake caught an 18.5-inch brookie from Swansea Lake up in Marquette County. That was the last day of April, and Billy was using a night crawler for bait. Tom Rickel from Interlaken used a worm in Black River, Sheboygan County. He caught a 17.75-incher. That was at the end of May. Roger Bugg from Mayo caught this 21.5/8-inch brook trout in Ontario. He was fishing Half Lake near Missinaba. It was the middle of May, and he was using a Rapala. Now, which do you think is better for brookies, night crawlers or Rapalas? Well, if you look in our trophy book on page 47, you'll see 39 trophy brookies listed by county. On the flip side are the graphs. Now, we see that most of the trophy brook trout were taken in the central Upper Peninsula. Of the bait fishermen, 11 used crawlers or worms, only one used a minnow. The favorite artificial lure was a spinner. 12 were taken on spinners, only 2 on Rapalas. Time of day, 11 a.m. was the best by far, and the best month was May, June the 2nd. Now here's a story from our awards banquet that fits the typical pattern. Fred Strickland from Gould City, fishing Crow River in Mackinac County with a crawler. This was, the first part of June. 10 in the morning, 4.5-pound brook trout.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Do you catch big ones like this? I mean, the normal size has got to be more or less about half of that, isn't it?
10 to 14 inches on an average. But I get a lot of them 16 to 20 inches.
Man, on a regular basis?
Yes.
Are there many other people fishing that stretch of river?
No comment.
Am I to assume that this might be close to the name of the river?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Sometimes you can't take a lot of stock in that when you have a fish like this. Well, that's terrific. This fight a lot?
About 10 minutes. About 10 minutes. I fight the brush, hit the brush, and that's where they're at.
I'll be darned.
So,
Well, that's great. Great tips. You aren't helping us out on exactly where you caught it, but that's a whopping big fish from Mackinac County. Congratulations. If you'd like to become more involved with a practical sportsman, how about sending us a home video on a hunting, fishing, or wildlife subject? We're looking for good ones to put on the show. If you have an outdoor invention or plans for a practical product you've designed, we'll publish it in our December digest of inventions, and Matt Radzalowski will build a number of these on the program. Or if you have an outdoor question, Charlie Keenan is our answer man. We're gathering your questions of law to publish in September. You'll need an application for our Hunting and Fishing Awards if you want to qualify for our trophy book. Our first edition is full of charts, graphs, and maps of where, when, and how the big ones were taken. Now, if you want information on becoming a Practical Sportsman member and receiving our recipe book, 4 other practical publications, plus membership benefits, write to me at Box 1001, Bath, Michigan, 48808. Summer is officially here. Matt Radzalowski says the summer fishing has officially started. He checked all around the state with the guides. Look at the conditions. We have down here Detroit River. Spotty perch fishing, but hey, 12 to 14 inches on the average. Smallmouth bass limits up in Dexter. Bluegill fishing, walleye fishing, good in some inland lakes. Alligators. Well, there was one alligator they got at Long Lake. It was a pet gator, but I guess they finally netted that one. Over at Lakeside Fishing Shop, we're talking Lake St. Clair. Limits of smallmouth bass, walleye limits, good eating size up here in Saginaw Bay. Andy from Frank's Great Outdoors says that walleye, 3 per boat, and largemouth bass fishing is picking up. There's some terrific bass fishing along shore there, Sebewing. Wellman's Oscoda, walleye are good in Van Etten Lake, smallmouth good in the backwaters up at Alpena. They're getting lake trout limits, salmon are spotty, but it's getting better. Pat and Gary's Indian River, the mayfly hatch is just starting up there. We're going to see it's in other places in the lower. Smallmouth bass fishing is good in Mullet Lake. Up at Drummond Island, Birch Tree Resort, they're getting good walleye, 2 to 5 pounders, smallmouth are fair. Harry's Place, Muskogee Bay, they're getting some limits of 15 to 24-inch walleye, and pike fishing is pretty good. Over at Lindquist's, Marquette, pike and walleye good, brook trout limits. Scott Superior, Ontonagon, limits of pike, and they are seeing lots of deer right now. Bayshore, Little Bay to Knock, walleye, 2 to 3 per angler, and pike are good up to 14 pounds. Let's head down the western side of the state. Well, first, let's jump over here to Higgins Lake. Good perch fishing, Houghton Lake, mayfly hatches on, can be a little bit of a problem to some anglers. Pilgrim's Village, crappie and gills, some limits there, smallmouth bass, 3 to 4 per angler. Over at Manistee, the port of Manistee, Kings and Steelhead are fair, according to Captain Amel. He's getting 2 to 5 per boat. Down in Ludington, Kings and Coho limits of largemouth bass in Hamlin Lake. Whitehall, perch. Now they're talking inland, not on the Great Lakes, but inland, 10-inch average. Smallmouth bass are good. Saugatuck, they're getting trout and salmon, 6 to 10 per boat. Walleye are good, 3-pound average. And Captain Nichols down here in South Haven reports lake trout limits. Why no perch limits? No perch fishing there until July 1st. And Matt Radzalowski. Here's the man, gets us the guide report, the practical craftsman, museum manager. Let's, we got about less than a minute here, Matt. We've changed our plans at the museum on weekends, right? Mm-hmm. We got the first Saturday of the month is going to be?
Sporting dog puppies for sale.
Okay, and then the second one?
Second one is going to be contests.
All kinds of contests. We have shooting contests, archery, casting. The third weekend?
Wildlife pets of some sort.
Okay, well, not necessarily wildlife pets.
Domestic pets as well.
You know, I mean, we're going to do things, for example, this weekend, you have lined up our first pet weekend, really?
First pet weekend here is going to be, we're going to have domestic rabbits out here. We're going to have people from 4-H clubs coming down here with rabbits. Kelly Hansen from Bath will be selling some rabbits here this Saturday from 10 to 1.
Okay, and then there'll be other people. If you have rabbits or you have pets, this is what we want to build, this pet weekend idea. We think it's pretty cool. We're getting a good response to it. And then the other 2 weekends of the month, 1 or 2, we're going to have things like hunter safety classes. We'll be announcing those. Sounds like a good rundown for the museum. The first 3 weekends of every month will be real corkers. You want to have your own show someday?
Someday, I think.
Sure you do. Okay, well, go ahead. Well, then you just tell people what they should do this weekend.
Get outdoors if you can. It's a great place to be.
Hey.
We'll see you next week.
Good work, Matty.
Fred Trost Practical Sportsman is brought to you by D.L. Kessler & Sons Construction, specializing in residential development and commercial construction since 1977, and by the financial support of viewers like you.
And the lightweight gun is easy to swing. Now, with that wide pattern, my margin of error was, a foot or so, and I'd still break the target. Now, the 12 gauge, on the other hand, had 2 chokes, both of them tighter than the 20 gauge. The improved cylinder choke will shoot first, then the tighter modified barrel, and I missed. 3 times in a row, I hit the first rabbit, but missed the second, shooting just a little bit behind it. Now, the difference was in the pattern. I had more margin of error with improved cylinder, and I'd miss by a few inches with the modified. Now, does this give you any clue as to how I'll do with the 410 full choke and only 11/16 ounce of shot? Well, I missed shooting a few inches behind the target. That's where I apparently always shoot with the 20 gauge. On the 3rd shot, I compensated, swinging the gun a few inches ahead of my normal swing, and that's where the center of the pattern actually was.